Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om. Hello, my friends. Let's talk about a very useful virtue. Let's talk about patience. Patience, that capacity of not getting upset if things are not moving quickly the way we would like to move them. Actually, there are two aspects to patience. Sometimes we want something, we would like something, and it's not happening, and we still would like, and it's still not happening, and there we have to learn to have patience until it's materializing. But there is another aspect. Patience just in the day-to-day life while communicating with other people. So many situations come up where we may feel offended, where we may feel misunderstood, where we think that people are not reacting intelligently. And the tendency may be there to get really that it's getting on the nerves and then expressing it harshly. And actually, we are creating a lot of problems like this. When I was in the beginning with Amma, then she told me two things. Because I was mad for wanting something. And instead of telling me to relax, she said, yes, yes, increase the desire for liberation. But then sometimes she added, but you must have patience. First part I wanted to hear, the second part I didn't want to hear. This Werner guy wasn't exactly endowed with lots of patience at that time. We may have our personal ideas how things should be, and so many times they just are not the way we want them. Then we can get very upset about it and can get very tense about it and lose a lot of energy and get maybe sometimes destructive. It's worth the trouble to learn to accept. It's worth the trouble to learn to deal with situations that are not to our liking and not getting pushed out of our equanimity. We can spend so much of energy just resisting facts the way they are. Vasishta Maharshi in his Yoga Vasishta says, those who learn patience, they are sought after throughout all the worlds. It has been put up as a virtue that is really worth the trouble to learn, but it has nothing to do with morals. It's not because out of moral reasons, but it's simply we learn not to throw so much of our creative, beautiful life force away if we develop patience. Something I didn't even want to have patience. I thought, no, if I develop patience, then things are getting even slower. I don't want to have patience. But then it's just getting more difficult and we are more trouble. It's worth the trouble to have patience. Anyhow, this world is a temporary appearance. When we are in the midst, totally identified with the story, then we may think, oh, things are taking so long, everything is so slow, things are not the way I like. But if you step a step back and see for what it is, then even a human lifespan is just a moment, that eternity. And how can we develop patience? Well, first, one has to learn not to resist against the idea, as I did for quite a long time. Resisting, I don't want to have patience. I want things to happen. Accepting, all right, it's worth to develop patience. What does it mean to have patience? It simply means that if there are tensions, instead of totally being in resistance and reacting, then accepting them and learn to relax. Be centered and relaxed. Remain in your equanimity in spite of adverse circumstances. This actually makes us grow. When we just foolishly throw away our energy all the time in all the situations because we're always struggling against them, fighting with everything, then our energy gets lost. But if we are learning not to do so, it's like that inner strength is continuously increasing. And that is after that there, not simply to deal with the circumstances, but it's there for everything. We don't really have to collect power. That that is an idea. We have to do sadhana in order to collect power, in order to get strong enough to achieve this and achieve that. All that energy is already here now with us. That source of energy is there, but we can learn to really connect with that source of energy, and especially we can learn not to foolishly throw it away then all the time. Somebody who has learned that becomes just powerful in the actions, in the presence, in the way of dealing with people, and also has the patience, has the power to accept that things sometimes may move slowly, even if we would prefer that they move fast. Patience gives you so much peace. If we are all the time impatient, then we are always agitated, always in pain. So it's worth the trouble not to resist the idea of developing patience, and then also consciously, sincerely be aware of, aha, here I can really learn something by developing more of that precious capacity of being at ease, of remaining in our peace. even when circumstances are full of tensions, even when people behave in funny ways. That doesn't mean we have to become meek and let everybody walk down on us. It simply means that we don't lose our energy. Sometimes it's also perfectly valid that we are very strongly saying no to something. Sometimes it's totally valid that we are strongly manifesting if something is not okay that we are seeing, but we can still inside remain connected with that peace, not lose it and get all identified with emotions and get destructive about them. Without patience, it's not possible to live in this world and become peaceful, have peace. Peace is already there. We don't have to develop it, but we have to develop the capacity to connect with that aspect of our being, no matter what. And that is what patience is about. Okay, I dropped the subject and I'm addressing you, my friends. Is there anyone who would like to come in and say something? You're welcome to do so. Not immediately? Okay. I may just add still to the same topic. Now something is on out there. Something is in the world. Something that is around the globe and is influencing people, and actually it's exactly acting against what I have been talking about. It tries to cut off that connection with the essence. It tries to make people more identified with their petty little emotions and thoughts. So it's at the present even much more important that we don't forget, okay, let's learn to be patient. And I see it's manifesting how people behave with each other. There is so much more aggression. Of course, there is the other side also. The light is getting stronger. People sometimes do wonderful things. These little acts of helping others, these little acts of compassion, these little expressions of love, they are all there. But unfortunately, large majority of the people is made just flowing along with the easier aspect, and it has been so long in control that it has become easier for us to slip into negativity and destruction. And I can see people who behaved rather gently before have the tendency to become much more violent, aggressive, how they're fighting with each other. How they are always ready that immediately, if something is not to their liking, whoop, react like this. The tendency to pull is very strong. And because of that, it's that much more important that we remember, hey, we can learn to live, even in this situation, we can learn to live in such a way that we are at peace, no matter what's going on all around, no matter how much negative energies are whirling around. we can learn to connect with that base, with that peaceful base. We can develop that capacity to be patient with people, with events, with the whole story, and be at peace in spite of all the pull that goes in the other direction. Okay, I'm asking again. Is there anyone who would like to come in and say something?
Hi, Werner.
Hello, Floyd.
Hi. Uh, yeah, so from what you said about anger, I remembered that I still have this tendency, sometimes I feel I'm right, so I can be
Yeah.
angry and, it comes, but what I feel is I don't have the space or time to control it. It just comes as a reaction, like they say, you snapped at me,
Yeah.
like a snap reaction, it just comes. And I think over the years, yes, it could have had a negative impact on relationships, on dealing with certain people, but it does not come with all people. But sometimes, it just comes as a snap reaction.
Yeah.
So, how does one, sort of, means I'm aware of it, but maybe it's happening lesser, but yeah, sometimes it can still come. That's what I feel.
Mm. Right. The first step you have already done. You are aware of it. That is necessary. And then
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
you can put the intent,
Mm,
the keen intention and sankalpa in the current that you want to be able to detach from that tendency. And then
mm,
you may decide, okay, I'm trying to control myself. The next time it happens, then I won't snap. And then the next time comes, and there you snap again. Out of old habits. The old habits, they
mm,
have their own momentum, they have their own power.
mm,
And even if we decide not to get sucked into those habits, then still they may be capable of pulling us into that again and again. But each time, even if it happens, no point in uh, berating yourself and pulling yourself down and say, "Ah, it's no good, I'm no good." But okay, accept it's still there, tendency is there. So renew that intent, that sankalpa. I want to be detached from it. And what is happening usually when such a situation has been there, then it's not only the situation. Then in the situation we may react aggressively, but the tendency is also after that it's still turning around in the head. And there the tendency is that that we always trying to justify. I'm right, they are wrong. I'm right, they are wrong. So I have the right to
mm,
snap like this. But the question is not whether we are right or not, but the question is whether we can detach from that tendency. And so they're not insisting on justifying and excusing, but saying, okay, there I'm going again. And even now, when I think about it, still there is a reaction. And then you can see that reaction. For shift the attention from the subject that brought it about to the reaction that there is still a trace of anger coming up, and see what it is doing in your body and learn to relax. And if you do that,
mm,
then you don't keep it on and on and on and on. And the next time you will catch you earlier. At the next time you may catch you earlier, and eventually you may be capable in the midst of the heat of the situation to remember and to relax instead of reacting.
mm. Yeah. I was also told that maybe this is something ancestral, maybe it is something which is there in the family pattern. Because I think it was there maybe in my parents, also in my younger brother, I see that. So is it something which gets carried, or I don't know?
I mean, a connection is there with the ancestors, an energetic connection is there, and we may pick up something from that, but that is not an excuse. We have always the possibility to work our way out, no matter where it's coming
Mm.
from. And then, of course, being with the parents and being maybe with the grandparents and being with the brothers and sisters, there you are living in the same energy field, growing up in that energy field, and there we pick up a lot of stuff and certain habits that are conditioning our behavior. But if there are destructive aspects in that, then we still can decide, okay, that is there, they have all contributed, that has all contributed, that this pattern is there, but nevertheless, I can detach from it. We are not victims that, that after that, for the rest of our life, we can give out the excuse, oh, I'm like this because I grew up like that, or because it's coming from the parents and the grandparents and the other ancestors. No matter how strong that influence is, we always have the power to neutralize that.
Yeah, some of the Advaita satsangs, they said, like, this is not, you are not the doer, so don't bother so much about it, because you are not the doer. So start seeing that you are not the doer. So maybe I think it helped me. I think it helped me a little bit to sort of detach from that idea of that I am doing this, when
Mhm.
this impulse reaction is coming. Uh, yeah, but I think, yeah, maybe it can still come. Yeah.
it still it still can come, and somewhere, even if you try these kind of tricks that I'm not the doer, you still somewhere feel that you are unhappy about it, and
Mm,
still you will throw your precious energy away unnecessarily in those situations. Then
mm,
that the being not the doer is a helpful concept to neutralize, to be so obsessed with the idea of being the doer. But it's also a concept. We can use it as a help, but that is a bit what I'm criticizing with the modern Advaita, that they say, okay, you need not deal with that. That's only on the level of the mind, and you are beyond the mind. You are prior to the mind. That, of course, is true. You are prior
mm,
to all that. And that, what you are, is not affected by any of this. But the personal
mm,
experience is very much connected with the mental state. And the people can tell themselves, okay, I'm not the mind, I'm not that, I am the essence, I am Brahman, I am the self, whatever, but then still go through their life suffering all the time because they are caught up in their mental mechanisms. And then it's not much use of saying, ah, that's not what you are, this is only the mind. As long as that mental level has the capacity to make people unhappy, to make people suffer, it's worth the trouble to have a good look at it and learn to let go of all this. Actually, to let go of those things that disturb us, that disturb us, they help that it becomes possible that actually we can dive with the attention back to the essence. As long as we are creating always barriers in the mind, then it's not possible. We can theoretically accept it as a working theory, but there is still all those mental barriers that we are creating and recreating, and it's worth the trouble to have a good look at them and learn to get rid of them. We don't have to
Mm.
torture ourselves. We don't have to then fall into the trap of saying, oh, I'm no good, I'm not good enough. And there we are actually going again in the same me history. Just accept, okay, I see, got me again. So what? I see the old habit is still there that creates trouble, but then and there you decide even stronger. I want to detach from it, intend to be free of it without punishing, without judging, just say, okay, this makes totally sense to remove because it's disturbing me. It keeps me and my experience caught up on a level which I want to go beyond, of which I want to
Mm.
go beyond.
Mm. Yeah. There was a teacher called Ramesh Balsekar,
Mhm.
and I used to listen to him, and he would say, whatever is meant to happen will happen.
Yes,
So, and whatever you choice you make is, it is still, you can make any choice. You can make any choice, but whatever is meant to happen will happen. So, somewhere, yes, it was a relief because, maybe I was trying too hard to, remove some conditioning or use psychotherapy or something like that.
yeah,
But I think now what you're suggesting is sort of maybe it is a middle ground, or maybe it is a integration of the idea that you are still in your divine essence, but you can also work on the human aspect and yeah, strive for something
yes, you
better
definitely
in the
can. You definitely can, and it makes sense. I mean, yes, the teaching, like Ramesh was harping always on that idea, on and on and on. It's all God's will, and nothing, no, absolutely nothing in your hands to decide. Once in a while, he would accept, he himself would say, it's a concept, what he's saying. But he repeated it so much that people would not take it as a concept, but as God's own truth. And sometimes he said it's from the absolute standpoint, and he was going on like this. It helps exactly for what you said. It can help us to let go of a lot of guilt that we are carrying along about the past, about things that we have done, and so on, and accept, all right, it was God's will, it was not in my hands, but it has, on the other hand, the tendency to dim that spark of life that people getting up. I have seen people being satisfied with that aspect of the teaching, with that kind of teaching, and then in a way spiritually go to sleep instead of being more and more expensive. Then okay, it's all God's will. I have no say in it. All is predetermined,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
go a bit to sleep. For there
Yeah.
I accept everything is God's will, but part of God's will is also that consciousness manifest has its own creativity. And then this whole
Mm.
story starts to make sense. According to that teaching that is all God's will, then the creation is just some kind of weird accident and doesn't make sense at all, but it does make sense. That consciousness manifest has the creativity, has the possibility, even when there are strong programs, even where there are strong tendencies that create barriers, that create pain, that create suffering. We have the possibility to work our way out of it, and it's definitely worth the trouble, and it's definitely also part of God's will that we are doing that, that we are taking that chance.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So is there like a lot of people ask me because I'm into astrology, and I don't know, I don't have an answer because I can only quote maybe Ramana Maharshi, or I can quote someone. Maybe
Mm.
after this answer I can quote you. But destiny, is there a destiny or is there a free will? Is there anything like free will, or is it part of destiny? Or
Mm.
that is what I think, that is what a lot of people ask, and I don't personally, I don't have any answer. But
Mm.
yeah, maybe if you can throw some light on that.
It's the age-old question that has rattled philosophers throughout the ages. And actually, you never will get a final answer because it's much more mysterious than we could simply put it in a sentence like this. As I said, I
Hmm.
believe everything within creation is God's will. But God's will is that consciousness manifest has also that creativity, that possibility to express that inner beauty in their own unique way. Now, God's will is one level, and there is another level, you can say, that is destiny. Everybody who is being born in this world has sort of kind of a package there. Unskilled astrologer may quite clearly see the tendency how this story is going to unfold itself. And if somebody just goes through the life half asleep, that life will most probably unroll just like this, predictably. But there is always that possibility. Destiny is a force within time and space, with its time-space continuum. But you are timeless. You are spaceless.
Hmm.
You can learn to bring your attention back to that. And the moment you
Hmm.
connect consciously with that, a new creative influence enters the current that is not predictable, that cannot have been foreseen by the astrology, that is not part of destiny. And so the more you learn to live your life in that timeless presence, the less power destiny has. It's there as a
Hmm.
force, but the more you are awake here now, the more there is not really any destiny anymore. The tendencies may still be there, but then you see those influences coming on subtle levels, you deal with it, and they need not manifest. So
Hmm.
it's you have free will as a possibility. But as long as we are going through half asleep through our life, then we are actually never using that potential. But simply, some person may go through the whole life and think I'm deciding all the time what I'm doing, but actually they are being pushed along by forces they have no idea that they exist. And it's very
Hmm.
predictable. But if you learn to step out of that current of time space, if you come back home to the timelessness of the present, here now there is no destiny. Here now you are in touch with that divine beauty. And if you root your experience in that, then your life can become more and more an expression of that and become stronger than destiny. And even if one feels the current of the destiny come, many times one may think, okay, it's just nothing wrong with the destiny manifesting in that way, but sometimes one may feel, no, I'm not going down that alley again and change the destiny. The more you are
Hmm.
living consciously here now, the less the horoscope has any meaning. the,
Hmm.
because you become more powerful than the destiny.
Hmm.
So you can, as an astrologer, point out to people tendencies point out what influences are there that have the tendency to create their trouble in their life or to have their good opportunity, but at the same time you can also make them understand this is just one level of influence and you have the possibility to go beyond it, to come back home to that which is prior to that, and from here something much stronger and much more creative may come out into the story, and then the destiny is getting weaker and weaker.
Yeah. So it's a suggestion for some kind of sadhana or going within in some way.
Somehow or other, it's good, it's worth the trouble for everybody who is willing to try at least to do so in one way or another, to consciously connect with your own potential, with your own true nature. Because as long as we are not doing that, then we just go like in a trance through our life, thinking we are achieving this and achieving that, but it's just a predestined story unrolling itself. There is the possibility is so much more. So practice helps. It's not that we have to achieve reality with practice. Reality is, it's here, it's now, it's already there. It's not something that can be created or achieved. It's that which makes every experience possible. But we have learned somehow this forgetting happens when one is born in this world, that consciousness that is projecting in this time space is forgetting the true origin and gets then totally identified with the story. And somehow or other, we can detach from that and come back in full awareness that we are not simply that unconsciously, but that we become aware I am in reality a divine being, not such a petty little personality with all those petty little characteristics and limitations. And for that, sadhana practice helps. It's not that we have to create it with sadhana, but sadhana makes us more conscious. And in that increased awareness, in that increased consciousness, it becomes easier to remove all those obstacles that prevent us from being clear about our true nature.
Yeah, thanks, Werner. Thank you.
Okay. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Hari Om. Is there anybody else who would like to come in and say something?
Hi, Werner.
Hello, Leela.
Hi. I wanted to ask, is there a difference between God's will and karma?
Yes, karma is more on the level what I have been saying is destiny. Karma is the law of cause and effect, and it's manifesting. It has its. There are causes on that level within this time space, and then they have an effect. While reality, divinity is prior to that. It's another level. Karma is only within the story. Here now you are free of karma. When you identify with the story, when you identify with the personality, there is the question of destiny and karma. But the moment you bring your attention back to that timelessness of the now, here is no karma. You just are.
Yeah, it's the same like your last answer to Floyd.
Right.
And what you just said now at the end. But I thought when something happens to me, let's say car accident, yeah, something like serious, we can say it's God's will. We can say it's karma. And we can put this aside and just like accept the situation and do what we have to do.
Right.
Relax and be aware and conscious and do what we have to do. Actually, would it matter if I know it's karma, that it was written somewhere that one day I will be involved in a car accident? Does it matter at all? Or if it's God's will, does it matter at all? If what you say is actually be in the present, be aware, as you always say, this is what
It
the
doesn't.
essence.
It doesn't really matter at all. But people like to have an explanation, and if they can hang on to an explanation like this, it may give them some peace. It's just then for their mental satisfaction, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is if you had an accident and then there are maybe unpleasant consequences of it, how you deal with them, and not whether you say it's God's will or it's karma that it has happened. That the present moment can happen as it happens. There are so many different influences coming together from different levels that there is a conjuncture of so many different influences that materialize and as this moment as it is. And it's just a mental acrobatic then to say, it's like this because it's God's will or it's karma or it's destiny or whatever. What matters that you are alive in this situation, and you can either be sort of like a victim of the situation, being helplessly drawn along in the current, or you can learn to be conscious and be observative and see no matter what is happening, there is always that aspect that is not affected by it. And then when you make that in your home, in your base, then you are free of karma. And then you feel naturally that you automatically, as long as you are in manifesting something in this creation, that you are playing out God's will.
Can you repeat what you just said now at the end?
Yes, that
The last.
if you are rooted in that aspect that is not affected by all these influences that create the whole story and create the situation, then something beautiful is flowing out of you and is manifesting. You are letting that divinity flow through you, and then you are also having that awareness. It's always in harmony with God's will. It's then there is not a conflict between personal will and God's will. Then you can still say, okay, when the car accident happened, it's God's will that this has happened, but it's not God's will that after that I'm a poor self-pitying victim, but that I make the best out of the situation and learn and grow and become stronger in spite of the unfavorable situation that has happened.
Yeah, another way to say what you've been saying all these years, actually, about, again, about being present and aware and, yeah, concentrated and connected.
Yeah, and it's a tricky thing. The one thing that Floyd also touched about the free will, because
Yeah,
you cannot give an explanation that is finally satisfactory for the mind, because you can say there is free will and you can say there is absolutely no free will, and neither of them is totally wrong,
yeah. All right.
because there is always that influence from all directions, but there is that spark that is there, that living spark of uniqueness, of divine beauty, and we can connect with that. And then somehow the question, it's not that the question finally is answered, the question disappears about karma and destiny. Then you live just spontaneously from moment to moment in
Mm.
harmony with that divine will.
It keeps changing from moment to moment, so there's no point in making a big deal of,
Right.
or like dwell on whatever is happening, put all the energy in trying to understand.
We can say,
Uh,
as a rule of thumb, it's like there is a certain line of the consciousness manifest projected in this world, and within the length of that line, that consciousness can do in a way as it likes, but it's somehow tuned into a cosmic tapestry. And the more you live in the present, in the timelessness of the now, the longer that line becomes.
the longer that line become, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I will have to listen to this again. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Werner.
You are welcome. Hario.
Carry on. Carry
Hario.
on.
Hario. I see Nava is already here.
Mhm.
Hello,
Yes.
Nava.
Hi,
Mm.
Werner.
Hello.
When I look at my own life,
Yeah.
it makes sense. Because I don't feel like, at least now, I no longer feel like I'm a victim that's being thrown around. But when I look at everything that goes on in the world and the suffering, I object to thinking that it makes sense. I've seen it as a mosaic, and I couldn't accept it when I saw it like that, and I still have tremendous difficulty with it. How can we say that it makes sense when so many people are suffering?
Of course, the fact that they are suffering and looked at from that level, the reasons why people suffer like this are completely nonsensical most of the time. I mean, it's out of sheer evil intention that so many things are happening that people suffer. Now, for all those people who are there, involved in those situations and suffer, each one has the choice, am I now a helpless victim of this very unfavorable situation, or am I really even at least attempting to make use of this negativity in order to become more self-aware? And that makes sense, that that possibility is there, no matter what the situation, at least that people attempt or just are overwhelmed by the situation and dive totally into that mood of being a helpless victim, and then of course the suffering becomes unbearable. But in the same situation, if one thinks, okay, it's basically unbearable, the situation, but even here I can attempt to connect with that aspect that is not affected, then they are not helpless victims and their suffering starts to fade away because they become aware there is that joyous, peaceful aspect that is not affected no matter what is happening. And that is the sense that is there always. Even in the worst of the situations, that possibility is there. We came here to learn, to grow, to outgrow. And that possibility is there no matter what is happening.
I'm not sure that it seems to me that everybody has a choice. Some people have so much going against them that they don't choose to suffer. They just don't seem to have another way of doing it.
Right, they are not aware that it can be different. And even if the awareness is maybe presented, then there is not the presence, not the strength there to even attempt. But the thought is there, it's just I'm a poor victim and it's going round and round and I'm a poor victim. And the more one sinks into that mood, then the more difficult it becomes. They even try to turn the other way and the more is the suffering. That doesn't excuse all those who inflict the suffering. But then ultimately each one has at least the potential to attempt not to slip into that suffering mode in spite of the external difficulty, in spite of the external pain, in spite of the external suffering. But most of the people, they are not even aware that this exists. And then even if you try to make them aware, they don't want to hear it. And then they don't have a choice but suffer. Right. Then that suffering ultimately is also not for nothing. Nobody suffers in vain. It's also this going through the intensity of the experience of suffering is also harnessing something very beautiful, but they are not aware of it. But that is staying with that being, and when they leave the world, they are that much the richer. So nobody is suffering in vain. But we don't need to suffer if we have that awareness that we can turn the attention away from that which makes us suffer and root it in that which is not affected by it, whatever is happening. But as long as we are not having the idea even and the capacity to do so, then people suffer more or less. Even in the same situation, some suffer more, some suffer less. But that suffering also is creating an intensity of an experience which is not lost, which is extremely painful, but still they are not going through that in vain because they are accumulating something precious which stays with them. And that wealth stays with them even when they get out of this world.
I can't disagree with that. I think from my own experience, that seems right, that when we die, it's just the body that dies. I'm thinking of my own personal experience. And there was a lot of suffering. And I knew that I couldn't do it by myself. I needed help. And it took most of my life to find teachers who could help. And along the way, I met teachers, some who didn't help and some who caused a lot of harm. And so I also think of people who really are genuinely looking for help and never seem to find it. And I know people like that. And I'm not sure that I would say that they push away the help that's there. It's just that it's not always easy to find it.
Right.
Right. And then again, there is more suffering because almost all of us need some help along the way.
Right, then is more suffering, and then actually that suffering is the teacher for the time being. But if somebody genuinely intends to work their way out, that attracts also the necessary help that we need. And then we can be open for it or not open for it. But many people are complaining about their situation, but some aspect doesn't really want to get out of it, because somewhere it gives for the mind a certain comfort to be in that self-pitying zone, and the poor little victim then I am, and I can continue to stay with it, and it in a way set myself right against I have the right that people should come and should do things for me because I am this poor suffering being.
Mm-hmm.
The mind is a tricky thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. That doesn't mean we should condemn people who suffer and say, you're doing that to yourself. If we can give a helping hand, by all means, give a helping hand to show them the way out of suffering. But people, those on the other side, have to be willing to accept that help and accept that finally, to get rid of suffering, it's not somebody else who has to do some magic, but I have to learn to work my way out of it. That's the teacher's job, or the helper's job on the way, to make the people aware, look, you have the potential already in yourself. It's not somebody that can really give you that, it's already there, and help them to find ways to connect more and more with their own potential that is free from suffering.
So, from what you're saying, if I see the suffering, whether it's general around me or people that I care about, and there's so much suffering right now. If I can look at it as you're saying, that something is actually happening, that they will carry on after the body dies, then the only way of looking at that is at some point things have to get better, because there is so much suffering, and that it is actually taking us somewhere else, rather than thinking this is never going to stop.
Right. This is anyhow temporary. This experience, this human experience, is temporary. It looks, when one is in the midst of a story and suffers, it looks like it's going on forever and ever and ever, but it's within the timeless, it's a momentary appearance. And it has always an end. And somebody who suffers in that way, at least in a very painful way, but at least in that way, they bring an intensity in their existence. When somebody suffers, they live intensely. When somebody is reasonably comfortable, then it's easy to sort of fall asleep and just float along. If somebody suffers, they can't just float along. There is an intensity, and every moment we live intensely is accumulating something precious, even if they are not aware. Once It's not simply that we get it when we get out of this life as a reward. It's there all the time, but what is accumulated. But most of the people have no idea and cannot be aware of it. I'm saying then once that person gets out of this situation, becomes aware, oh, it was not for nothing. No, not a drop of that suffering was for nothing. There is also something positive happening at the same time.
Mhm.
Now, when you see your friends or your close people suffer, see their suffering, but don't let their suffering make you suffer. You stay connected with your being that is free from suffering as good as you can. And the more you can do that, when you connect with them, the more something beautiful flows over to them and they may be helped. They may be ready
Mhm.
for that help or they may not be ready for that help. They may be aware of that help or they may not be aware of that help. But it doesn't make you suffer, and it's, by the way, the best help you can give them. And externally, if they're ready to talk with them, but if they are not ready to talk, then just connect with them.
Mhm. Mhm. I remember that you've said that other times, that if you suffer along with them, you're just adding suffering to the world.
Right.
And yes, and that stays with me. And it's one of the things I do in my meditation. I work on the jhanas and connecting to joy,
Yeah.
and feeling that that's right, that's something I can contribute,
Right.
and not more suffering.
Not more suffering. It's not
Yes.
necessary. No.
Yes.
Suffering is not for nothing. It's not in vain, but it's not necessary. If we don't create suffering, then we don't suffer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we leave it at that for today.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you.
Hario. Hario.
Yeah,
Hario.
thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else who would like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to ask something. So in regards to suffering, let's say now in Israel, a family that they were in Gaza, some of them got killed, whatever. And I saw them yesterday on the screen, and everybody was feeling guilty that they couldn't do more to save the others. It's complex tragedy, so-called. And I wonder, in regards to what you've said now to Nava, and also before, the suffering of the other, it's difficult. It's difficult, you know. What could you say to a person like that, that they talk about feeling guilty, like this child, I don't know how old she is, maybe 18, that her father is still in Gaza, and that she was released and she couldn't take him with her, and this guilt feeling, the way they expressed it was so deep. What could you say to such a person?
Poor person is totally in the conditioning of the upbringing, that even the thought of not feeling guilty seems to be immoral to them.
Yeah.
And so they push themselves to feel guilty and have to continue feeling guilty. But actually, if a person in this situation could break through that conditioning and see that actually it's totally wrong. That if there is somebody somewhere suffering and I'm connecting with that person and I'm feeling so guilty that I'm not suffering the same, then I'm just adding more negativity to that other person who is in a worse situation. It sounds so noble because we have been trained to feel like that, that it's immoral not to suffer with suffering people, but it's nonsense. If you can have empathy, you can feel their pain, you can feel their suffering, but then after that, to let us pull us into suffering is just what Nava repeated. It's just adding more suffering to the world. On the other hand, if that person was capable to cut through those conditionings and become aware, there is the possibility to be at ease, at peace, in spite of the situation, and then connect with that other being instead of with guilt. Connect with love, connect with light, connect with joy. Then something very beautiful flows through that other person, and actually that other person is much more helped in that way than when these guilty feelings come there.
Yeah.
But the mental makeup doesn't want to let it happen. That one starts to feel guilty if one is happy, because how can I just be happy because when there are people suffering in this world? I know from
Exactly.
I know from myself, I had to break through that barrier. That suddenly I thought, how can I just be now so fine and happy? As if it was something immoral. No, it's our birthright. It's our natural way of existing, and we have been trained and conditioned to be unnatural, and we have the total right to cut through that conditioning, to get out of it and come back home to our natural way of existing. And our natural way of existing is playful, joyous, at peace, at ease, expressing that inner beauty, and not to suffer hell all the time. And it needs a breaking away from that conditioning that we can accept. Yes, I have the right to be happy. It's my birthright. It's my natural God-given nature. And I can connect from that point with people who suffer and have that empathy and feel their suffering, but not being pulled into suffering, but instead, in spite of that, connect with your own joyous, creative, beautiful, divine being. And then something very beautiful is flowing to that people, to that person who is suffering. Whereas if we feel compelled, it's our duty to feel miserable because they are miserable, then we are miserable, we are adding more misery to the other person, we are just adding more misery to the world. And yet this is drilled in our head, this is the right way to function. That if we know somebody suffers, especially somebody close, then we have to suffer. That's our duty. And this is wrong. We can't come out of that. But the person in the situation would have to be ready to at all listen to any of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Werner.
I will leave it at that. Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hello, Andreas.
Hello, Werner. Just can I add something to that?
Yes, sure.
I find Buddhism very helpful in that respect when the Buddha says that there is suffering in this life, it's unavoidable. This helps me a lot. And to see that like Christianity is so much evolving around suffering, like Jesus suffered for you on the cross, and all this puts in these tendencies, I believe, that people are getting into this mood. But my question is more that about like free will, because I've thought a lot about this, and my impression is that like thoughts are just arising. They're not my thoughts. And it's basically the same with like intentions, right? With willful acts, that they're just arising, but they're not my will. It's not my will, it's just arising. It's only the problem that we identify with the arising of intention. Would you agree to that?
Not quite. I mean, there is that impersonal beingness, that impersonal divinity, but that oneness. In that oneness, there is the multiplicity. There are beings that are that divinity, that same divinity, and yet have their own unique flavor. Nobody is separate, and yet there are myriads and myriads of beings in that oneness. And that being can consciously manifest, express its inner beauty, and so can consciously muster up an intent. And that the intent is not simply appearing out of thin air, out of blue space somewhere, but can be a conscious act of expressing something that is unique to that being. Essentially, all the same divinity, not separate, all one, and yet still unique. And that uniqueness has a right also to express itself. And thoughts, they may just rise, they may come out of your own being, or they may come from anywhere, from any level. The thoughts may come and we may pick them up, but then we can identify with those thoughts and go along with it, or then we can step a step back and let the thoughts come and go and not get really involved in that line of thought.
I'm not sure if I understand completely the first part about the unique being. I have to listen to that again.
Yes.
But it isn't part of like the problem how much you identify with yourself and your person and your mental acts?
When I say that unique being, then I don't mean the person at all. Then
I understand.
then I mean that being that you are, and that being is also not incarnated or reincarnating, doesn't have past lives or future lives. Even now, that being that you are is not incarnated, just projecting an aspect of itself in this world, in this time space, and that is the person. And the person after that somehow by magic creates that feeling of being something separate, something unique by itself, while the I sense the life comes from your being, and that being is all one with all the others, and yet has its own uniqueness, its own beauty, in its own unique way, how that oneness is being expressed.
So if I'm aware of my divine nature, then I have more free will than when I'm identified with my body and mind.
And the personality with Mr. Andreas. Yes, definitely. It's like the more you dive into that, it's like the longer the line is where that uniqueness has a possibility to express itself.
So if I'm completely identified with the Andreas, then there's little free will.
Practically nothing. Right.
Yeah, that's what I meant in the beginning, that usually I am very much identified with Andreas, and then
And after all, our personality is just a bundle of programs that has accumulated while growing up and accumulates in our day-to-day life. It's just a story that has patterns, that has programs, and if that total identification is there, those programs will just repeat themselves. Totally predictable. The moment you start to detach from that, the moment there is an opening that it need not go after this program, but something else can express itself. We need not go down that alley again and repeat the same silly stuff again, but something else can express itself.
then the possibilities of free will are widening, and the line is getting longer.
Right, the line is getting longer.
But when I'm identified with Andreas, then it's just an illusion that I have the illusion that I have make choices and have a free will, but it's basically an illusion, right?
Basically an illusion, because people who are so totally identified with that role they are playing, they think they're making choices all the time, and they are not aware that there are forces and patterns and programs that push them along all the time, very predictably.
Yeah, that's what I meant, like the thoughts are rising and the intentions are arising out of the subconscious programming without any awareness that this is happening.
Right, but the moment you start to become aware, then you can step a step back, and then the thoughts may rise, but then if you're not feeding them, if you're not identifying with them, that line of thought may just wither away. And more creative and more beautiful thoughts may come up. But if we are identifying with a thought line, then we are feeding that thought line, and we go on and on and on and on.
So to become aware means to center and relax.
To center and relax, to do your meditation, to do whatever that helps you to become aware that there is so much more than that personality. That personality is a momentary role that we are playing, but prior to that, that is that being, timeless, spaceless, birthless, deathless.
Would you say it's helpful to say to myself in some moments, this is not me, this is not myself, this is not what I am?
Yes, if it helps you to detach, to step a step back, then why not? Can very well say that.
So the basic thing is to take a step back from my conditioning and from the believing in the thoughts and intentions.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hario.
Ayo.
Hello, Nelly.
Hello, Werner. I want to share something. Today we heard some news about our friend. She's a woman, and yesterday her house was burned.
Oh.
And yes, and I feel so shocked about it.
Yeah.
To our friends, they were working at her house doing a repair.
Yeah.
And they were painting the walls in the room, and I don't know clearly how it happened, but these paints were flammable, and something happens, and the fire began. Fortunately, they managed to escape, but the dog burned in the house. It's really, I feel really sorry about that. Yes, and I feel a lot of thoughts in my head because of that. I really feel shock, and I understand how changeable everything. Only recently she came to us, this woman, and everything was okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's two friends, and now it happened, and they are in shock. All they all don't understand how it happened. Yes, I just try to digest this information, and I was sitting listening to you, and I just got knew about that before satsang. I was sitting
just before satsang,
yes,
you heard it.
Just before satsang, yes, we knew about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I was feeling my breath, putting attention at that. Yes, and it calmed a little, and I see that it's not the most terrible thing that happened. Her house really burned down. Maybe I don't know if it is possible to repair something, because the second floor is burned completely and the first is partly.
Yeah.
Yes, and I understand that it is thanks God that they all are alive, and this is good news. Yes, and this is so. This incident is not the most terrible, but really, in spite of that, I feel shocked that how changeable everything. Yes, and
how impermanent, huh?
Impermanent, and I feel that I don't so much afraid of death, but I feel a fear of pain, because to be burned in the fire is really very painful, as I think, as I can suggest. Yes. So if this happens naturally, it is okay. I don't feel fear of that, but when it happens like that, I feel fear, and I understand that sometimes we lose something. Some, like the woman, she lost the house. Sometimes we lose something else that we appreciate, and it is really not easy to survive, to beginning to do something. Yeah, the strong experience sometimes, even for me, that I didn't didn't lose anything in this situation.
Yeah.
Just wanted to share, and maybe you say something.
I just have to go away a little forward. I will say something, huh?
Yes, okay, yeah.
Okay, there I'm back. Of course, if something like this is happening suddenly, it's a shock. That somebody who is close to you, who had all these ideas, how their home is improving with their work, and then whoop, it's gone, wiped out. Now for yourself, the same what we have been talking about before. Basically, the whole satsang, it came a bit up. There is the possibility to suffer. There may be sadness. You may feel the sadness of the people to whom it helped. They are close to you. You may feel sadness. You need not fight against sadness or whatever feelings are coming, but then you let those feelings, those thoughts come and go, and try to connect with that aspect that is prior to that. That is, as you see in a situation like that, everything is impermanent in manifestation. Sometimes immediately it changes and everything is different. But there is that base that doesn't change. That has been there yesterday, that is there now, there will be there tomorrow. The time and space are changing all the time, but that is there solid like a rock. You connect with that and then let all the feelings come as a reaction to what you are experiencing, connecting with what your friends are experiencing. But it doesn't need to pull you down into depression or anything. You can be strong in the midst of that. And then when your friends connect with you, something of that strength flows also over to them. And they may feel consoled and also have the enthusiasm, helps them to build up the enthusiasm to continue. Never mind, in spite of the drawback, in spite of what has happened, life continues, and somehow or other we can install ourselves again. That which counts is not affected by a tragedy like this. Of course, it's sad that their dog died in the fire. It must be sad for them, but they had at least the good fortune that they could escape and didn't burn there. And now you say you think of the possibility of burning alive as like a horror picture that is there in your mind. There's very little chance that you ever will burn alive, but if it's there and has been activated now because of this situation, then don't fight against when that picture comes. And let the picture, the imagination come and the fear come that comes along with it. But at the same time, be here now and see how it is manifesting this fantasy, what it is doing to your experience right now. And see how the fear is manifesting in the body, see how the anxiety is manifesting in the body, what it is doing energetically, and relax, and relax, and relax. And if you deal with that image, that fear that is somewhere locked in your consciousness, in your subconscious, and sometimes comes up that there must be a terrible, horrible way of going out of this world, burning alive, then it's not that you should somehow try to take steps to make sure that this cannot happen, but you just learn to confront that fear, that fantasy, and deal with it in such a way that it loses its power. That when it comes along, instead of getting all tense and getting all worked up about it, it comes along, you see, aha, there I see you coming along, and you relax and it just goes away.
Okay. Thank you, Werner.
The
Thank you very
stronger
much.
you are now, the firmer you are connected, the more you also a support and a help for your friends who have experienced this disaster for them.
Okay. Thank you, Werner. I
You're
try. Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
All right, my friends. I think we have covered enough for today. This was quite intense. Whenever it comes to destiny and suffering, then people are alive because it's touching everyone. And we can learn to deal with those things, with the fears, dealing with the uncertainty of destiny or no destiny, karma or no karma, victim or no victim. We can learn to deal with all that in such a way that we become aware no matter what is happening. There is that ground, that base, that being that is not affected by it, that is prior to this, timeless, spaceless, even now not incarnated. Let's come home to that. I wish you all well. Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hari Om.